Welcome back to Not a Straight Line with me, Pete Daly-Dickson. This is the show that explores the non-linear journeys of artists and entrepreneurs to inspire you as you zigzag through your own non-straight line life.
Hi, I'm Matt, Pete's audio engineer, and I'm stepping in for the intro to this episode as Pete had some personal matters to address and didn't get a chance to record this introduction, which today is to special guest, Mr. Fractional himself, John Arms. Pete unexpectedly connected with John not too long ago on LinkedIn, and it took a single conversation for him to realize how perfect John is to come onto the podcast. Growing up with a big family and big dreams, his reflective and spiritual approach to his career and his life led to a pivot point where a fractional career made more sense to address the toxic leadership he saw in the workforce. From humble beginnings to now being recognized as a leading figure in the expanding world of fractional work, John's Not a Straight Line journey will inspire you to live your own zigzag life as fully and completely as you can. Now, let's get to the conversation with Pete and John.
If you're a regular listener to Not a Straight Line, you'll know that we start every episode with a simple breathing exercise. It's a physiological sigh, which I learned about through Andrew Huberman. And a physiological sigh is 2 breaths in through the nose, held for a beat, and then breathe out through the mouth. And we'll do that 3 times just to bring the 3 of us into this conversation space together. So if you just want to close our eyes and take 2 breaths in through the nose. And again. One last time. John Arms, welcome to the Not a Straight Line podcast.
Thank you, Peter. I'm glad to be here, and I appreciate that you're having me on. Thank you.
Just for the sake of the listener and myself, really, just orient us geographically. Whereabouts are you in this wonderful world of ours?
Geographically, absolutely. So I'm in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is in the middle north of the United States, and it is typically pretty cold at this time of year. So climatology-wise, normally it would be about 5 above 0 Fahrenheit right now, but we have a little bit of a heat wave, so we're kind of enjoying that.
So it's only 10 degrees above 0.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be something. Yeah.
Well, you've obviously got good insulation and heating in your room because you've got a nice open neck shirt there.
Yeah, I'm comfortable. Yeah.
Excellent. Let's climb up the stairs to the top diving board, and we'll jump off into the conversation with the same question that I send all my guests a couple of days before, just to give them a little bit of an opportunity to reflect. When you saw that question in that email, what time in your life came to mind immediately?
The first thing, I had to read it twice. The first thing that came to mind was having children and our first child. But then I read the question and it said, surprising. And it wasn't a surprise. So I'm going to remove that one. We knew they were coming. So, but certainly transformational, right?
Yeah.
The thing that came to mind, Peter, for that question, that really big turning point, right? For me, it was about 2 years ago. It was a big, huge turning point. And that is when I began a journey of self-awareness. And I had never really done a whole lot of that before. I happened to get very lucky and meet a friend who runs a kind of a table for that. And I can look back and say, wow, it wasn't like a lightning bolt moment. But if I look back, I'm like, that was a big positive pivot right there. So the journey of self-awareness began in earnest about 2 years ago.
That's really interesting. So what was going on in your life that when you saw that opportunity made you think that was something that you wanted to do?
Yeah, I think what was going on in my life was everything was kind of normal, right? Like life was good. The job was good. The work was good. I'd already started, a couple of new businesses and done some things. And I think unconsciously, I realized there's more to it than this. I have more to offer, not necessarily more to do, but I sort of realized there's more to this world. There's more to my experience. And I want to know what that is. I want to explore. So I had that feeling, and it just so happened a friend of mine, Steve Blexrud, we would take walks in Minnesota. In Minneapolis, there's a lake called Lake Harriet, and it's sort of close to town. So a ton of us walk around it all the time. And we went for a walk, and he started asking questions about it. He's like, "Yeah, what do you do for, what are you reading, and where's your head at?" And I'm like, "I feel like I'm in some sort of transition in life, but I'm not sure what it is." And that is where he gave me the book, The Go Giver, and I read it in about 2 days, very quickly. And that's kind of what started it. That's kind of what started it.
I'm actually really interested to hear you give that as your kind of pivot point because, listener, I'll just give you a bit of context. John responded to a cold outreach on LinkedIn. I did a bit of a campaign the last 3 months of last year, and John very graciously didn't reject me, except not only accepted my connect request, but also then accepted the follow up communication to book a curiosity call. And we had a call before Christmas last year and got on really well. And here we are a month or so later. And in that curiosity call, John, I wouldn't have pegged you as someone. I'm sorry, I'll face it the other way. I would have, and I did peg you as someone who is supremely self-aware and as someone who had almost certainly been on that self-awareness, self-development journey for a very long time, just the way that you showed up on that call. So you telling me that that's a relatively new version of John?
I think it was a graduation. So before I really got on the self-discovery, I've always been a very spiritual person, not religious, but spiritual. Meaning I know there's something more behind all of this. There's some force, there's some energy, call it Buddha, call it God, whatever you want to call it. But I always sort of was connected to that. And it was always through nature. That's where I felt like I'm part of something bigger. I belong in this world in a way, and I always just called that spirituality. And so I've been always very connected to nature that way. And so that was kind of my grounding, right? Like I grew up Catholic, so there was some religious stuff,
And guilt.
but yeah, right, exactly, exactly. So part of it is losing a lot of that, but that since I was a very young boy. I was outdoors all the time. I couldn't flip over enough rocks to see if there were salamanders underneath it. I couldn't sit next to water. I couldn't be next to water without sitting there and just contemplating. And so inside of me, right, I was always there, but I never read the books. I never really took it much farther than that. I just didn't even know that there was another dimension to explore like that. So I stayed in that spiritual, place connected. I'm a big fan and honor here in Minnesota. The Native American culture here is just so connected to the earth. And I've always just been right there with that. But I studied that, but I didn't even know there was all these other dimensions.
When you say other dimensions, what do you mean? Because there's one argument, and after this episode, after this recording, if you want to listen to the episode that was released on Christmas Day last year, it's with a guy called Alistair Mackenzie, and he equates spirituality with personal development. They're like two sides of the same coin: personal development, self-awareness, whatever. So it would seem to me that you've been on the journey of self-awareness. You've just not called it that all your life. Is that what you mean about graduation? And in which case, what were you graduating from and to?
I don't think I was graduating from so much as I was adding another layer.
Okay.
I was so used to going inside or getting in touch with nature, and I still am. I absolutely still am. And then I realized I just learned so much about, you walk around in this world long enough and you start to develop paradigms. You start having preconceived notions. You start learning things about humanity and yourself through books and people who study this stuff. You start listening to David Bayer and some of the people. I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek. You start listening to these people who are sort of talking about these things. And one of the big transformational books for me was Brené Brown, Daring Greatly. Just amazing, right? And I'd always been a voracious reader. I always have a voracious reader, but not of that content. And so that's what really put me on a path of, wow, it just sort of opened up that moment and the whole new exploration, which I'm still on and we're all on.
So if you're identifying that as a turning point or a zag or a pivot, as you called it, what difference did it make for you? What changed?
But what changed, and I'm so grateful for it, Peter, is I was able to lose the self-interest. Maybe lose the ego is another way to say it. I never had my arms around that, never really thought about that. But it was sort of a gift to understand that if you can really lose your ego, lose your self-interest, you can really do some good in this world. You can really help people. So, I think self-interest is part of survival. You have to go to work and earn a living and get the kids through school and all that. And you get to do things like, okay, so you want to make as much money as you can and all that. But I never felt the transaction was pure. How that I have to give more than I get. And I sort of always felt that. And it was so about that time I realized, John, if you can lose the self-interest, you can really help some people. And then by helping people, you can have a very wonderful life. You can be wealthy and healthy and all the things, but I believe we're here to be in service of others. And I didn't really understand that, Peter, until about then. I felt it, but I guess that's when I really put it into fifth gear and really stepped on the pedal.
What do you like? What materially specifically is changing as a result of that? I mean, it seems to me that you're now living that quote from the famous Zig Ziglar. I don't know if you've ever heard it. Do you know who Zig Ziglar is?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
That you can get whatever you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. That was that I think entered my brain a couple of years ago, and the hook was set. The hook was in, and I just had never gone that deep into self-exploration, and I had never gone that deep into helping others. I mean, I had done a lot, right? I had done a lot, but I'd done a lot of charity work, a lot of philanthropy, but maybe that more intimate give is what I was hungering for.
So how does that show up, say, in working with clients now, or tangible? Give me specifics, John. Come on.
Yeah. I'll give you a specific example. I'll give you a very specific example. And again, it goes back to Bob Burg's great book, the Go Giver. Always give more value than you're getting paid for. Now, this is an interesting thing to talk about because growing up in the advertising and marketing business through the 80s and 90s and all of that, very much a transactional take, right? That was just the economy. But always give more value. So in the agencies and how just that worked was don't give any more value. You had to charge for every second. The minute the dollar stops, you stop, right? It's all in a box. Everything you give is in a time box, and you don't give any more time because we got a bill for that. Bill. Okay, that was a structure. I think that was a structure most companies lived under for many, many decades. But there's something missing from that. And I realized when you bring more value than you're getting paid for, the whole world opens up with clients. So specific example, I'm a fractional CMO. So like all fractional CMOs, our job is to obviously own the marketing, right? That's the whole idea, is take it off our client's shoulders, put it on ours, and carry it forward. And that's what we do. So planning and strategy and leading and all of the things come with that. But what I realize is it doesn't begin or end in that bucket. So as a fractional CMO, I have to go deeper into just that box in order for me to feel good and for me to really help my client. So every single time I'm working with a client or on it, I always get into and ask and push for, how is this what we're talking about? Maybe it's branding, maybe it's a market. How is this affecting everybody else? What's happening to the left and right of it? How does the sales team think about this product? And clients are like, that's a good question. I don't know. And I'm like, well, let's do it. Let's go there. And they're like, well, I thought you were just kind of the marketing guy. I am, but I care about everybody else and I don't want to throw surprises at them. So let's talk about that. So I get into these conversations that are far beyond marketing, strategy, planning, and leadership.
And you're not getting paid specifically for that work.
I am not getting paid for that.
But in giving that value, it's probably not only cementing is not the right word, but kind of connecting you at a deeper level with your client because they recognize that you really are interested. But it also makes the quality of the work that you are being paid for that much better and that much more effective.
At 100%.
Everybody wins.
Everybody wins. Everybody wins. And yeah, is it an extra, if everything lived in a box, it's $10,000 a month. And, that if everything lived inside of there and it was just, marketing leadership, I guess that would be fine. Right. But I'm like, well, let's bring some more value here. Like, how can I make this better for this client? And so that's how I learned. And that's something I learned, recently of always bring more value than getting paid for.
It is a great book, and I'll make sure it goes into the show notes if the listener's not read it. So we spent a little bit of time, 15 minutes or so, in a relatively recent part of your life, just in the last couple of years. But this podcast is called Not a Straight Line for a reason, and it's the whole of our life. So I actually want to go right back to that John that is picking up rocks to see if there are salamanders underneath them. Where were you brought up? Did you have any brothers and sisters? What's your overriding memories of your childhood?
Yeah. So, and by the way, I just love the title of this podcast, Not a Straight Line. There are no straight lines. I absolutely love it. It's a great name for this podcast. Kind of dialing back, I'm one of 5 boys in a family. We grew up here in Minnesota, and I'm one of 5 boys. I'm number 4, right? And very loving family. Our parents, fantastic, very loving. But when you grow up with 5 boys, especially 5 arms boys, there's a lot of testosterone in that world. And so there's a lot of wrestling and a lot of fighting. And we go to a Catholic school and, doing that during the 70s. I got to tell you, I feel like that was the blessed beginning, early stages of life. I always had a basketball team around me, my brothers, right? There's 5 needed on a court. There was always a lot of closeness, a lot of outdoor nature in our life, and very grateful for that.
Were you all relatively close in age?
Yeah, 5 boys in an 8-year window, so that was that's pretty close.
Your mum was busy. Well, and your dad.
Yeah. Mom was a saint, and so was Dad. And Mom would say, you boys, boys are going to wrestle. That's just all there is to it, right? They just have to fight. And not fist fight, but just, that was at least me and my brothers. And she said, through the course of your life, we wore out 3 rugs. In 18 years, we wore out 3 rugs in the house. We'd start wrestling and screwing around, and there was the TV room where Dad was, and he goes, get in the other room. Mostly it was go outside, but yeah. So, but that was a time, and we're so blessed, those of us who grew up then. We really were feral children. You get up in the morning, out you go. Right. And you didn't come home until the streetlights came on. You might be 5 miles away starting a fire in the woods with your pals. Parents didn't know. Parents didn't care. There was no supervision. We played sports and all those things, but it was a very free, a wonderful way to explore your curiosities in the world at that time. We don't have that anymore. And I'm sorry for this generation for that.
I am too. And inexorable march of progress and all that, but I think it's to their detriment.
Yeah. The way we were able to try to get that with our 3 sons was nature, right? Like we couldn't live in a world where we could just open the door and out they go. Well, there are some good stories about that, but we were always out in nature, and that gave the boys a chance to be very exploratory without much supervision, but not like we had when we were kids. We'd get on our bikes and off we go, and nobody was wondering where we were, and nobody knew where we were, and that was okay. I'm
never going to let a guest get away with saying something like, "Oh, there are plenty of stories there," or "There's some stories there." So if there are stories there, let's go there. What was coming to mind when you said that?
All right. I got a great story about that. So our middle son, Jackson, I lived a feral life like all Gen Xers, right? And but we were not able to give as much of that to our children. But still, they had a bike and they could go out and about. Jackson, our middle son, he's the one that was always pushing, getting farther out, and very social kid. And one day he got out on his bike and with a friend of his, and they rolled their bikes about 4 miles away. No idea what they were doing. My mother had given Jackson a library or a card to Barnes and Noble bookstore. Do you have those over there, Barnes and Noble?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So I gave him a card to Barnes and Noble bookstore, and he takes it and he goes out to Barnes and Noble bookstore. This was in the summer, scorching hot. He and his friend go out there. Long story short, so they're feral, right? They take off on their own. They're off, So he did that. So he had a little bit of that. He comes home and tells us, "Hey, yeah, I went to Barnes and Noble." We were so proud. You went and got books? No. A $50 gift certificate or gift card to Barnes and Noble. And he bought $50 worth of Toblerone chocolates. Him and his pal did. To make it even worse, worse or better, I guess, for the story, is it was a hot day. Him and his friend Sevi, they took all the candy bars and put them on the sidewalk to spell out the word or the letter, or the numbers 50. It's 90 degrees. They all melted. So he comes home with this backpack full of melted chocolates. My wife reaches in there like, what is going on here? And he tells us a story, and my wife is furious. Like, that was for books, not chocolate. And you can't return all this chocolate because it's been melted. So my kids did have a little feralness like I did as a kid. That was Jackson doing that. And that is Jackson's personality.
Got to get out and explore.
Mm-hmm.
And talking about exploring, were you always with one or more brothers, or was an element of introversion in you and you're on your own?
No, my brothers were then and are now my best friends.
Hmm.
And we have been that way, very close. We do a ton together. We own a lakeshore property together. We've just always been very, very close. We all have friends, we all have buddies, but my closest relationships are with my brothers.
That's pretty special.
We know it's a blessing.
Not necessarily usual or typical.
Yeah, I hear that a lot, and I only know my experience, but my brothers have always been my best friends. Not that I don't have other great friends, but there they are, right? There they are, and me to them as well. We lost one brother, our oldest brother, Mike. He died when he was 39. He had epilepsy and he had a grand mal seizure, and so you can imagine the scorched earth that brought. That was in 2000, so quite a long time ago. But losing it's almost like losing a limb. Just so we're all so close. But of course, we hold them close in our heart and our memory, but that's how close we were.
And your parents still with you?
No, my parents, if they were, they'd be almost 90. But they're gone.
Still doable.
Still doable. Yep, still doable. But no, my dad passed in 2005. My mom passed about 3 years ago, and just wonderful parents, very loving, and we weren't rich or anything like that, but there's just a tremendous amount of love from my folks.
So you've already shared your love of nature and exploration and stuff. What about at school? Was that a place that you wanted to be, or you would rather be anywhere else but?
I did like school. My love kind of felt in a couple places. I loved English and writing. I loved all of that, and history with that. Loved it. Couldn't get enough of it. I also had, with the nature thing, a lot of love for biology. I love those subjects. Math, calculus, not my game. Not interested, right? All that kind of stuff was not for me. But I love those subjects, and I still do to this day. I was telling a friend's son the other day, there's something that young boys, at least growing up for me, we all go through what we call our dinosaur stage. Just love dinosaurs. Can't get enough. We got dinosaur stuffed toys and we read dinosaur books. I never left my dinosaur stage. I love paleontology and the science of it and all of that. So those were the subjects I really, really liked. I liked being an athlete. I love being on a team, and I played a lot of sports and enjoyed the heck out of that, and great friends from there. So I rather enjoyed school. I did. I was lucky for that.
Did you get a sense then of what the trajectory of your life would be? Were you one of these kids that 8 years old, they're going to do this and that's it, or did you just have a sense of curiosity about what was going on all the time, and that you would kind of figure it out?
I think I was more the latter, more sense of curiosity. I think I was the latter. I knew early on, very early on, that I didn't fit in the normal boxes. And one expression of that is I was kind of friends with everybody. Boys and girls, the long-haired heavy metal people and the short-haired, jocks. And, I loved everybody. I thought they were all really cool. Because how sometimes kids, they like kind of get in their groups and they stay in their groups.
Were you accepted in those different groups as well?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I'm 6'4". Try shoving me out of a group, But yeah, I always so in that way socially, I like that. And the benefit to me was good, I think, in that I think that hatched an entrepreneurial spirit, tons of curiosity, and by exploring so many different layers and dimensions and chapters and cultures of life, I never really fit in a particular one. Like you would never say John's going to grow up, and people always say John's going to be a writer, storyteller, that from a very early on stage. But that's part of me. But nobody, it wasn't a nice, clean package. And it still isn't. And I think I'm lucky for that.
Do you recognize any of that as coming from your parents?
I do, coming from my parents and my family. My dad was, at the time, we called him a stockbroker. And, independent, really, that's, speculation and trading. But he worked for a big company, but he was his own guy, very, very much his own guy. And my mom was just delightful. She had so much energy. It was ridiculous, but very into the arts. We were at the art museums and so much of that our whole life. And I always thought that combination was pretty darn special. We were reading tons of books from the get-go. We were expressing ourselves artistically because my mom loved it so much. She'd bring us into that world, and that was delightful.
So expressing yourself artistically, that's a pretty broad spectrum. What resonated with you artistically?
Writing, for me, for the most part. None of us, my mom was a wonderful piano player. None of us were able to do anything with any sort of musical instrument whatsoever. Not in any way, shape, or form, right? But we were all voracious and continue to be voracious readers. Writing is a very, very big one. My brother Mike was a pretty good painter in various ways, right? In various ways, just that self-expression came out. And I think that came from in Minnesota and Minneapolis. There's the Walker. There's several great. We have a great art scene here, and we were always brought into it. And so, at a minimum, an appreciation of it. And then, of course, painting. My brother Mike was a painter, and everybody just expressed themselves in certain ways.
So you must have had a sense, then, just go back to my earlier question, that although you didn't know exactly where your interest would take you,
Mm-hmm.
did you hope that it would involve writing, or were you set on making sure that what you did involved writing?
I think it was more of an evolution. I think it was more of an evolution. I did it. I was a storyteller. It was just part of who I am, who I was then. My mom would say there was me and my four brothers would be in the back of our Buick, and we drive northern Minnesota. There's a lot of lakes, and you go up there and you swim and spend weekends. And we drive 3 hours north. Of course, there was no seatbelts in the cars back then. So I'd stand on the back seat as a 5-year-old, and I would keep everybody busy by just telling them stories I would make up on the way. And that I just did it. I just did it. And that was me expressing, I guess, some sort of artistic itch. And I've always been somewhat of a storyteller. I think, Peter, that was more organic. Like I didn't have it in my head. It was just part of me, and it came out. My wife, God bless her, she's so lovely and wonderful. She knew early on, she's like, I'm going to be an architect. She knew it. She felt it. When she was a kid, she was drawing buildings. She was contemplating all that kind of stuff. She knew it, and she stayed in that lane, and she's magnificent in it. I did not, and that's okay. Yeah.
So just going back to the question in terms of, you're coming to the end of high school, or, well, let's say high school, you're thinking about college. Did you go to college, and what was that thought process about, okay, where's this part of my life gonna go? What was important to you then?
So college, I went to the University of Minnesota. At the time, it was probably the second or third largest college in the country. So huge college, huge campus, very big, world school, right? Continues to be that to this day. Your eyes open up in a place like that. You're exposed to things that, like, it's not some small country college, which I love, but that's a big transformation. So when I got to college, you know what I was thinking when I got to college? When I got there, I thought, I am going to be part of the Department of Natural Resources here in Minnesota. That's where my head was. I don't know what that is, but I'm going to take some biology classes and I'm going to be part of the DNR. Maybe I'm going to go help hatch fish. Maybe, all of that stuff was in my head. And then I realized how much math was required for the science requirement for that. And I said, I'm out. I'm out. So then I walked across the courtyard. There's a building, the journalism building, and I took journalism classes. And I really found that's a place to express my love of writing, and ended up with at the time it was bachelor's of art in communication, bachelor's of art in journalism, which is a little bit harder. So I took the journalism route, and I found a job at the Minnesota Daily, which an advertising job, which is the student newspaper at the time. So all of these pathways sort of pushed me in there. But I'll tell you a funny story. When I entered college, what is this, 1986, it was different then, right? It was more of a ride than it was a destination. You're in, off you go, learn, experiment with life, all of that. And I'm poking fun of myself here. I remember going to college once wearing not a blanket, sort of a poncho. I don't know. I got a poncho at a thrift store, and I was like, I'm going to wear this today. I would never do that today. And maybe I would, but I was like that's just weird. That's just weird. But so anyway, just didn't care and enjoyed the ride. Be like Bruce Lee. Be like water.
You're the third journalism trained guest that I've spoken to this week. So
oh, really?
Maybe this is becoming my niche, helping journalists kind of reflect on their life. What, as you think about where you are now and the work that you do with your clients, and thinking back to that version, if you like, of John, what's the thread that connects the two?
I think the thread that connects the two and remains very lively is I think you'd call it entrepreneurialism now. The absolutely no fear to step into something I don't understand. No fear whatsoever. I just don't carry that. I don't carry that. And I would do things that probably were abnormal, like, get a job at the Daily and then go, I had the greatest class, the history of Far Eastern art, amazing class at the University of Minnesota. I just never fit in the normal go to school, pick a lane, stay in the lane, maximize that lane. It's just not me. Not me. Now, I don't fault. That's wonderful. I think that works for so many people, but I stayed in writing lanes. I stayed in creative lanes. Parts of me, maybe the no fear, helped me to explore new lanes. I'm a storyteller. That's a very consistent theme. I'm curious, which is a very consistent theme.
And how do you think that helps you serve your clients in the way that you do now?
Curiosity is such a gift. The curiosity you can carry into a thing. Why does that work? Why do you think that way? Why are you struggling with this? Sort of an infinite hunger to uncover and unpack and get to the meat of things is natural to me. And so when you take that into the marketing sense and to a business sense, it's a very healthy thing. It's a very healthy thing. I think where it manifests with me and my clients is, you've heard this before, there is no growth unless you get outside of your comfort zone. And I am constantly taking my clients out of their comfort zone. I feel that's my responsibility. I don't want to make them uncomfortable. I want them to thrive and succeed and do really, really well. And I know that if they stay in their comfort zone, that's not good.
That's really fascinating what you're saying there, John, because I know that saying, that concept from a personal growth perspective, that if you stay in your comfort zone, you ain't growing. That's the only way you can possibly grow. But to hear it expressed in terms of a company's growth is like, yeah, I mean, it's obviously, if it's a universal truth, it's going to apply whether it's a person or a company. In what ways then do you take your clients outside of their comfort zone? Do you take them outside of their comfort zones personally, or do you get them to take their company outside of the company's comfort zone? Can a company have a comfort zone And what do you do? What do you do?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I'll give you an example. Very good friend of mine, he's a leadership coach. Fantastic. Love the guy. Got a great program. And sometimes I'll be with a client and I'm there for marketing and I got to help the customer grow. And then I realize, oh man, I think you got some leadership issues here. You got some dynamics at this company that you're trying to grow it and you got to learn some leadership here. And for me, like, I don't think I would ever do that as an employee. Hey, boss, you're a shitty leader. Can I swear on this episode? Is that okay?
Of course. Yeah.
Hey, boss, you're a shitty leader. You're not doing that the right way. The way you're doing things is going to hurt it. What about going this direction? That is not normal, right? I have to do that, but I don't say it that way. I'm like, wow, this is really hurting us. Our people aren't happy. Your team's not happy. Let's go learn some leadership together. So I've taken my wonderful clients and I've said, let's go take some leadership classes. Let's do some personal development. Let's learn new ways to help us get over the humps we're having as the company. That is a way you would never do that in America anyway. I mean, can you imagine going to Jeff Bezos and saying, hey, you got that all wrong. You ain't doing it right. Sorry, there's a better way. You're a shitty leader. And maybe that's true, but I don't think there's an open door to tell them that. I think we have a responsibility when we see something that needs to be fixed or addressed or could do better. As an independent fractional person, I think it's part of responsibility to bring that dimension in. And it's wonderful. I mean, nobody was trained leadership. Most people weren't trained leadership when they decided to start a company. But it's part of it. If you want to succeed, like, you have to be good at leadership.
It's almost like what you're saying there, John. It's almost like you can do a better job helping a company grow, bearing in mind that marketing is the growth of a company. But alongside that, there's probably a math equation here somewhere, because alongside that, you've also recognized that growth only comes from being outside of your comfort zone. But that when you are an employee in a company, it's hard to, or if not impossible, to get the people above you to do things differently, to be outside of their comfort zone.
Very hard.
It almost seems to me that indirectly, and on behalf of my listener, I kind of joining dots for them and me. Are you making the argument that you can do a better job helping a company grow as an independent fractional CMO than you can as a CMO employed by a company?
100%. And there's a lot of ways that exist, but one of them is that very thing. We are outside of the pickle jar. There's this saying, you can never read your ingredients if you're a pickle on the inside of the pickle jar. Very hard, right? But if you're on the outside, you're objective. And if you're fractional, to be a good fractional is to have some wisdom behind you. You have some years. So you've seen something. So you can bring that objectivity and that viewpoint informed by something completely outside of that business, which is so interesting because the way America has been doing it for so long, and I think it's so screwed up, is, hey, Peter, we have somebody, we have a role for you. We have a marketing role for you. And we are a company that is in agriculture, feed specifically. And I need to have you have 30 years of experience in the feed industry for me to feel good that you can bring some value, right? That has been the thinking. Like, there's entire recruiting organizations built around that. What we're learning is, well, there's a problem with that. You need 30 years of agriculture thinking, and you get 30 years of agriculture thinking.
Which is probably, let's be brutal about it, 1 year multiplied 30 times.
Right. Yeah, very much so. Very much so. So I ask people when I'm teaching them how to become fractional is you have to think about the wisdom you gained, not the lane you were in. So you and I, through the course of business, we'll get good at what we love. I call it the inner nerd. My inner nerd, I have two inner nerds. One is teaching people fractional and the other is marketing. I'm an absolute nerd about both. And it doesn't matter if I did that at my agency or if I did it when I worked for Best Buy. It would not have helped me in my career to have been at a place for decades or in a certain industry. First of all, that's not the way to satisfy my curiosity. That would have been difficult. So the thing that we're learning is objectivity. The value of objectivity and wisdom is through the roof. It's huge. The value of an outside viewpoint that is objective and informed is massively needed, particularly for companies that are trying to grow. They're limited with the amount of resources they have inside. They need outside thinking. It's the kind of thing that gives them life. I always hate it when a company grows and grows and starts doing well, but something happens and they crash or exit before the idea could really manifest into what it needs to be. That happens a lot. And that's that insular thinking. This is as far as it can go. I can't take it any farther. This business is what it is. Like all this closed thinking. And a lot of times people are like, that's it, we're done. We're going to go sell or something like that. And by that close thinking, it's like, well, this thing could have been so much more bigger, better. It could have been so more impactful if you got out of your comfort zone and started to think differently about it.
So let's pretend that I was an ideal client of yours. Who would that be? Is it by industry? Is it by size? Is it by star sign? What?
This is a fun one to unpack. For me, the way I describe it, before I get into the normal ways we describe an ideal client, is a leader who is extremely frustrated with their marketing. That's what matters most, right? That is the thing. And I know we don't look at it like you want to know what industry they're in, how much money they make, all of that, right? That's the historical way. I'm interested in people who are frustrated with marketing, know it can do better, or it's a mystery to them. They know it's part of their success, the recipe for their success, but they're just frustrated with it. Those are the perfect companies for me.
Yeah, presumably, one-man band could be frustrated with their marketing, but you don't work with solopreneurs.
I don't. Typically, the companies I serve are sort of on the small side, about $3 million in revenue, on the large side, about 50. And I always say that set is small enough to need the help and big enough to sort of recognize it and invest in that.
Okay. So I let's say I'm the CEO of a company like that, and it's in an industry which kind of, do you have any preference? Do you like working in particular industries?
I don't. I love them all. I've worked in so many.
Is there any industries that you won't work in?
I try to avoid retail. I don't really, it's not that I wouldn't work in it, but retail it's exhausting. The strategy is great. The planning is great. Execution, and when you're in retail, it's like an octopus. It's like 1,000 arms to it. And I try to avoid that. I really love B2B. I love B2B.
Right. Well, what about particular industries? Are there any industries that you won't work in?
For sure. I love the industries, B2B as a big thing. And then I love tech inside of B2B. Love that. And that can be so many things, right? That can be software as a service. That can be some specific technology. I love that. I love businesses or B2B businesses. Again, it's not industry specific. It's that have a really nice impact on their industry or need that. And that can be restaurant supply. That can be landscaping, right? It's so funny. And I get these clients. Because when I network, like, who can I refer you to? I'm like, anybody who's frustrated about marketing. What industry? I don't care. When someone's walking around the world looking for people who are frustrated with marketing, they're very easy people to find. Right? If I were to say, go find me somebody, let's say I love the outdoor industry because I'm in the outdoors. Do you know anybody in the outdoor industry? I don't know. Maybe, who knows? But if I tell somebody, do you know anybody who's frustrated with marketing? Easy. There's so many of that. And so my general parameters are frustrated with marketing or know it can do more for them in that $3 million to $50 million range. And there's a reason for this. There's a reason this is the way I talk about targeting and marketing and all that kind of stuff. In the independent world, in fractional, the path to business is totally abnormal. Where the business begins, where your client begins, is in that frustration moment somewhere that you don't know about. There's a CEO or a leader saying, this business isn't growing, we're having struggles. I've been doing also the marketing or the sales, and it's bugging the hell out of me. That's where it starts. That's where it hatches. But historically, that path would have gone to, so go post a job and let's find somebody who can fill this. We don't live in that world anymore because fractional's here. What happens is that CEO is going to say, hey, team, who knows somebody? It's oriented in networking. And we did a study on this here in the States and found that, I think we studied 500 fractional pros across all dimensions, IT, marketing, you name it, ops. We found that 99% of their clients come from networking. 99%, which means there is not a fractional job posted. That's not the path. And we spend so much time and energy on that. So what I teach, what I think we should all embrace is, okay, if it's going to be networking, right? If that's the case, and someone's trying to solve a problem and your name is going to be brought up, the most important thing you can do, and the thing that people remember, is not going to be the lane you're in. It's not going to be that you're marketing. They're going to remember how you made them feel. They're going to remember how you made them feel. You should talk to Peter. Sounds like something he might know something about. God, he's a good dude. He's just, we had a conversation and he was super interested in my family. And we just connected. They're going to remember that. No one's going to remember. If I go to a networking event or find you online and I'm like, hey, here's me, right? Here's what I do. I tell you all about myself. Yeah. No one wants that.
It seems to me that you are articulating the central premise of this podcast. Well, this conversation experience, that you are the value.
Yeah.
You specifically, John, and you specifically, the listener, are the value. And that's what you need to communicate in a non-dickish way. Don't, and the way you be a dick about it is just to stand up and say, hey, look at me, this is me. The way you don't be a dick about it is you connect with other humans and get into conversation with them.
You do. And the thing that you have to begin that road is you have to fall in love with yourself. You have to say, I'm good, I'm worthy. There's things about me that are special. And in a corporate environment, how often does that come up?
Never.
Right? It doesn't. It doesn't come up. It's not part of the ethos. It's not part of the ecosystem. But you have to say, and that, I don't mean you're arrogant and ego, right? You have to say, hey, I'm an optimistic person. That's a good characteristic of me. I like myself. Hey, my inner nerd is marketing. That's a good characteristic. I like myself. That's it. You just have to like yourself. And that awareness of it will exude its way outward. And that's all it takes, really.
Easy to say that, John. Not so easy when you consider the societal and sometimes familial baggage that we carry with us into our adult lives. How and when did you fall in love with yourself?
I wasn't for a long time. I think a lot of us weren't. I think I really got to know myself and really appreciated myself sometime in the last, obviously throughout my life a little bit, but in a real strong, secure way, probably only in the last 6 or 7 years. Out of a 56-year life so far, and in the last 6 or 7 years.
And is it always going to be a function of age? Do you think it's possible to get there earlier, or do you think we have to go around the sun a few more times?
I think it's possible to get there earlier. I wish we did things in academics to help people get there earlier.
What would need to be done?
Mindfulness. There's a movement here in the United States, and I think it's absolutely brilliant, is giving to others. There's an idea of, some countries you have to do military service. It's just part of being a citizen there. We don't have that here anymore. Jon Stewart, great comedian on the Daily Show. I don't know if he makes his way over there. He's a riot, and he had a great show, and he was talking about, wouldn't it be great if after high school in America, we require you to do some service for a year. You can go clean trails in the national parks. You can go help in oppressed areas. You can join the military. We could create 1,000 ways for people to do that. And when that happens in your life, you learn that it is others that are more important than you. And it's not saying you're not important, but the gift of helping others and service before self and losing the self-interest is a wonderful thing. I didn't really get that till 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, because it's not born in. Our society has been very much very transactional. We have the shareholder economy. It's all about money. It's all about take. It's extraction economics. That's just the culture. Now that's eroding, but that's been the culture, and that's created some nasty things in people's heads. What I do when we teach people how to go fractional, the very first thing we get into are those things. Through the course of a life, you learn, you have some things that block you from learning. Fear, arrogance, status quo, not getting out of my comfort zone. You stack a lot of these up through the course of a life, through the course of a corporate life. And we want what's on the other side of that. We have to learn that, no, I can't go forward. If I never get out of the cave, I never get to eat a buffalo. It's not going to happen, right? You have to get out. You have to face your fears and get on the other side of them to survive. So I wish I wish I learned those things earlier. I wish we had some mechanism that was more formal, like our education system, to kind of help people earlier in life grasp these things.
I think that truth which he articulated there, I just think is so beautiful, that others are our route to everything. They're our route to happiness. They're our route to opportunity. They're our route to positive mental health and fitness. It's like it's all in others.
It's all in others. We're all connected. When we were young, like I said, talked earlier about my parents, such lovely people. Very often, throughout most of our youth, we would go down to a church called St. Stephen's, and we would serve meals to homeless. And that started when I was a kid, probably when I was 5 or 6 years old. My parents always had us into that, right? We weren't homeless. We had money, a lot of money, but like we had a car, we had a house, we could go to school, all those normal things. But my folks know, like, not everybody has that. And we have a responsibility to help those who are either empathy or compassion, to help those who just through the course of life don't have that. Well, that certainly is helpful. I think we could do better. I think we could address these things in our academic world. I think culturally we could do some things. That's why I'm very hopeful about the next generation. Everybody talks about millennials and like, oh, they're all on their phones and they're out. I've never seen a more selfless group of people in my life. My kids they are so giving. They're so loving. Their generation is, people can criticize them all they want. These folks are not like the boomers. It's not a self-interest. It's not a me generation. It's not that at all. I don't see it. I'm very hopeful. I'm very, very hopeful because I think they're givers. I think the next few generations are great givers. And for me, I'm 56. I'm a Gen Xer. I think we're good givers.
I want to come back to a bit of the conversation we had a few minutes ago where I said, let's pretend that I'm an ideal client. So now I know that I'm a CEO of a tech company. I'm turning over $5 million. I'm frustrated with my marketing, John. I have a CMO. What do you say to me? Although I suspect, what questions do you ask me to make me realize that, I don't know, do you get your clients to fire the CMO, or how does it work? What it would be like? Let's say you and I met at a networking event, and you already know that I'm frustrated with my marketing. What do you say to me? What questions do you
Very
ask?
first thing I say is, tell me where it hurts. Where does it hurt? Give them space where they can talk openly about where it hurts. Where does it hurt?
But it's flatlined. We've been turning over $5 million a year for the last 5 years.
That's a very likely thing people say. It hurts because we're not growing. Okay. Why aren't you growing? What do you think? What's causing it? What are you trying to do to grow? Curiosity is, you have to ask questions to learn and listen. Marketing is a piece of it. Sometimes marketing's not the answer. Sometimes that's not always it. But it's not an analysis of what they're doing or what they're spending or who's doing what. It's bigger than that. It's the strategy and the plan and what you're trying to achieve. Marketing will contribute to that. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. But the first part is, where does it hurt? Sometimes, actually very often, they kind of want to keep you in a box. Yeah. Well, it hurts in marketing. That's why we're here. Okay. Marketing usually hurts because sales are down. Are sales down? Yes. Oh my God, sales are down. They've been flat for 3 years. Why do you think that is? When's the last time you've should we kind of go look at your customer a little bit more? God, I'm glad you said that. We never spend time with customers. These things come out in the course of curiosity. We really get an idea of where the help is needed. Now, here's what I know. Anybody in marketing knows this. It's all about the customer, and nothing happens without the customer. I'll be honest with you, the customer has the same journey. It's been set forever. The middle of it is when they're buying from you. But some stuff has to happen before they buy from you. They have to be aware of you and some level of interest. After they buy from you, they have an experience with you, onboarding, whatever that is. That is the journey customers go through. You can put as many stop points in there, but you cannot. These are basic truths about marketing. So a lot of people don't know that.
So just to kind of generalize that, somebody's got a problem. They start to look for ways to solve that problem. In that, they become aware of you,
right?
And then they buy from you, and then they have that experience. I mean, regardless of what you sell as a company, what service you provide, that customer journey is the same regardless. And it might be a problem that costs £100 to solve, $100 to solve. It might be a problem that costs $100,000 to solve, but it's the same.
It's the same journey. It's the same journey. And when you're trying to solve it yourself, you're looking inside mostly. Like, what are we doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? What are you doing wrong? What is she? There's that. And the best way to do that is step outside of the problem. Go step in the customer's shoes. Let's spend some time there. What do we know about them? What's their pain? Well, we haven't really looked at that in a while. Or the worst part where you really have to help people is we already know what that is, that some people don't want to explore, but you have to. You have to know your customer intimately. And I'm not saying where they live, what their URL address is, what their phone number is, and what industry they're in. That's surface level. We can get that with a quick ChatGPT search. You have to know deeper. What are they frustrated with? What is their journey? You know, the Donald Miller's wonderful story brand journey is a great way to get to know your customer in a better way. That argument is wonderful. It's your story, and the customer is a hero. It's awesome. So that usually gets people moving the right way. There's some weird thing about marketing. People kind of put it outside of themselves. Like, you just figure that out. I don't want to get involved in it. It's too much. SEO confuses me. I'm not creative. You know, there's all sorts of barriers people have. It's like marketing is this mystery, but it really isn't. The customer journey is what it is. Marketing plays a role. You have to know it and understand it to succeed there. But a lot of companies just don't want to deal with it. And I understand that. It's a craft, but some just don't want to deal with it. Well, good luck growing without meeting new customers.
So how many of your clients already have somebody in a CMO role employed in the company? And what do you do about that?
So far, since I've been fractional, the fractional retainer clients, none of them, they did not have a CMO. That's why I'm there. No CMO. And one has been a $50 million company. One's a $2 million startup. There is no CMO. It's either the CEO or the head of sales, maybe some younger kid doing some tactical execution, but no leader in that role. That has historically been, when it comes to a retainer, you know, that perpetual leader in a place. That's what we fractional step into. They weren't there. Sometimes there are people there, but they're not me. They know different things. They're lovely and wonderful, and we all have different skills. And sometimes I have to come in and add to that soup, add a new flavor to the soup. So sometimes they do have a CMO.
Do they feel threatened by you?
I think they would if you didn't get immediately into having a good conversation with them.
If you weren't curious about them, then I would imagine that they would feel threatened.
You have to get into that right away, because it's probably not the CMO who's bringing you into the organization. It's probably somebody else. And what I do is I like to go, listen, I am here. I exist to make your life better. This isn't about me. I am part of your team. I am here to make your life better because you're in the marketing world as well as I am now in this business. And I exist to make marketing go better. I'm here for you. Now, that doesn't mean I'm like, so you can give me all the shit you don't want to do. That's not what that means. I have a very specific role, strategy, planning, leadership. That's what I do. Those are the things that I'm good at. So if you diffuse that fear early, you end up with a wonderful relationship. Because the reality with a lot of places that have a CMO, the nature of it, they're so busy. They're doing the work of two people. The responsibilities are big. There's always, 5 meetings that they are stuck in. It's hard to be a CMO inside they need help. It's hard. It's a hard thing. So empathy goes a long way, and stepping into their reality and saying, I'm a helper. I'm not a threat. I'm here to help and accentuate this.
Yeah, I just want to dig into a little bit into something that you said there, that you're there for a specific reason, and you mentioned strategy and planning and leadership. I'm curious that what you didn't mention there is the thing that you've mentioned in other parts of the conversation, the part of the thread that's kind of woven itself through John Arms's life, and that is writing and storytelling. So where does that come in the work that you do for your clients?
I love it. I love it. I love it. So the storytelling comes in strategy and planning. I can't write, like any writer, I cannot write a good story. I cannot write a good story unless I have a theme, unless I know who I'm writing for. You got to do your research. You look at all the best writers, they know exactly who they're writing for, and they know the kind of thing that they're writing about. A good writer is a good researcher, and that's strategy. So through the work of strategy, through the work of planning, through that work, a dimension that I bring to it, and I think most people do, I don't know if everybody does, but I do, is how does this strategy turn into a story? And that's where creativity comes to be. How does this strategy become a wonderful story? And I'm in the middle of that with a wonderful client right now, and it's amazing.
Tell us.
That's where oh my God, this is just wonderful. So there's this wonderful book that was written 20 years ago here in the States called Fish. And it's all about, it was this great John who wrote it and did a film about it. They were near the Pike's Place Market in Seattle. And the famous Pike's Place, that's where people throw the fish and all that kind of stuff.
Don't know about that.
Oh, it's fantastic. There's all sorts, it's a kind of a legend here. So the fish throwers in the Pike's Place Market, he's watching them work one day. And these guys are the happiest people he's ever seen at work. He's like, oh my God, their job is dead fish. And they throw them and they're the happiest people I've ever seen. He said, the joy that they have. Why can't we have that everywhere in our world? Why can't every business have that? So all of a sudden that sparked it hatched this wonderful thing called Fish with a book and keynotes and workshops and all this wonderful stuff. I came in recently and the brand's been around for a long time, but it needed a jolt. Brands that have been around for a long time. You can't just stay as you were.
So what does Fish do? What does that brand do?
Fish does workplace culture, organizational culture.
Okay.
Training through keynotes, workshops, one-to-one coaching, all the beautiful things.
Okay.
The way to address it here in the States is there's great people that do it, right? There's Simon Sinek. He'll come in and help with culture. There's all sorts of people that'll do that.
Yeah.
And Fish is up there with that group. So here comes Fish, and we're bringing it back to life. Well, Fish was 20 years ago, and it's awesome. These are human dynamics of there's 4 philosophies. One is make others people's day. Be there, be present, choose your attitude, and play. These are the 4 things that he saw were real about the Pike's Place Market. So condense it all into this wonderful thing. So here we are 4 years after the pandemic. So now we do all the research. I'm like, all right, we got to get to know the customer. Whatever the customer was 20 years ago, it's certainly changed, right? Because the world changes and what's new. And what we realize is in the last 4 years as a society and certainly as a workforce, we become very disconnected. Whether that's hybrid, whether that's remote, whether that's micromanaging, there's been a huge disconnect of the people. And we realize, so that's the research part, right? That's the understanding the realities of the market and the people and the customer today. And what we find is people are hungry for that connection. They don't want to go back to the office. So you've got all this friction, like get your ass back to the office. Screw you, I'll go work for somebody else. It's just nothing. Return to office is nothing but friction. Nothing but friction. So we're thinking about this and we're doing this research and we're brainstorming together, and we'll realize we're not looking for a return to office. We're looking for a return to people. That is what we hunger for. That is what we crave. That is our story in the world today. We are all about returning your people to each other. And there's a way to do that. If you try to put everybody within the vicinity of each other and call that culture, it's not going to work. You have to come from a place of returning your people to each other. And this is our story. This is our story. That's how all of that strategy worked, which gave us the insight to say, oh my God, that's it. That's our story. That's where story comes out. And so when we go when our sales team goes talks to customer, we ask a very simple question. How's return to office going? You can imagine the answer. Shitty. Nobody wants it, right? Let's talk about returning your people to each other. Let's forget about the office for the moment. Eyes light up. People understand it really isn't about the office. People don't miss their stapler. They don't miss their cubicle. They don't miss toxic meetings. They don't miss commutes. But what they do miss is human connection. And that can come about in a lot of ways that are new, that don't require us to be within 3 feet of each other, staring at our screens, never talking to each other.
Ah, it's beautiful. You mentioned earlier, John, that one of the things that fractional CMOs bring to a company is wisdom. And that is a function of going around the sun, but I guess it's also a function of being involved in different companies. Now, you mentioned Best Buy. What are just like a broad brush stroke picture? What are some of the places that you found yourself from studying dinosaurs and journalism? I don't know if that's what you studied, but from doing your history of Far Eastern art at the university to what you're doing now, where has that sort of non-straight line journey taken you? What sort of environments, what sort of cultures, what sort of industries, what's accumulated in John's wisdom that he's bringing to his clients?
I call it, everybody has a backpack full of wisdom and everybody's experiences are what's in there.
Let's unpack it a bit for the listener.
So when I teach people, listen, you're going to go out in the world, you're going to be fractional. And people are kind of raw. They're kind of insecure and have some fear. I'm like, hold on a minute. How long have you been working? 30 years. Okay, 30 years. Every year you've been putting wisdom in your backpack of wisdom and you just didn't know it. Like, what do you mean by that? I'm like, just imagine there's a backpack and you've been walking around the world and you learn something. Just think that's a rock that you put in your backpack. It's awesome. It's a little piece of gold. We go through life and we gain wisdom without even realizing it. But every day we're more, it's so weird. Every day we're more valued than the day before through the lens of wisdom and experience. So why is it in normal society, the older you get, the less valuable you are to a company? Doesn't make any sense at all. None whatsoever. Going back to the Native Americans, and how much I love about that culture is the elders are the most revered, honored, respected, because they know it. With age comes wisdom, and there's a respect and understanding of that. Many other cultures do. We're getting there here. Fractional is how that manifests. Anyway, the backpack full of wisdom is what you have.
What's in yours? I want to get an idea.
I did not have a straight line. So the one thing that the recurring theme is I've always been in ad and marketing places, whether that's an agency or in-house and all that. Corporate America, let's talk about that for a second. Early in my career, I worked for Best Buy in their ad department. That's as big in corporate as you can get. They were on their massive growth trajectory. They were printing money. It was just huge. And it was a huge organization getting huger. It actually wasn't that huge when I started, but Best Buy is Best Buy. They're in the Fortune. I don't know. They were for a while. They were way up there. So that's huge, massive corporate. And with that comes huge, massive and corporate. All the things that come with that. And when I had my agency, I started an agency in 2004 and ran it to 2018. Called Wingnut, and we served a lot of huge corporate clients, Honeywell and a little 3M work, and United Healthcare, like huge corporate things. And I gathered all of that experience. Meanwhile, in other places in my career, little agencies, little creative boutique shops, ones that just love doing like the most artistic marketing you could possibly imagine. And then other agencies that were not like that. It was just big volume ag marketing work and things like that. So I had this exposure to all these different work culture dynamics, big and small, markets, big and small. But I got this sense of what it's like in giant corporate. It's a lot different than what it's like, what I call the growing economy. I don't like to call it the small business because everybody thinks that's a local hardware store. Most small businesses are not that. They're a startup idea. They're a $20 million manufacturing company, but they're all trying to grow. That's the nature of business. That world is a lot different and a lot more interesting, a lot more humble than the massive giant. The dynamics inside those two worlds are completely different. One is very bureaucratic and political and a little bit arrogant and very defensive. They want to build a moat around what they've made. The other is very much, we got to go out and earn it. We don't know what we don't know. We're trying to grow, which means we have to get out of our comfort zone. So I've had all those wonderful experiences in my career. It's delightful. And that's my path of wisdom. That's my backpack of wisdom. And those experiences inside of there, right? There were some wonderful, amazing teams and some terrible teams. There were some wonderful, amazing cultures and some terrible cultures.
You learn as much from both, don't you?
You do. Every single failure is a lesson. Now, unfortunately, people take failure as a failure. They think it's a notch in my failure stick. I did something wrong. I didn't do it right. There's some mental self-abuse going on. When in fact, every failure is a lesson. It's not really a failure. It's at a minimum, it's you learn not to do that again. It's a lesson. That's all it is.
In a way, that comes back to what you were counseling earlier about loving yourself and totally accepting yourself. Is that because if that's true, then the I'm a failure can't also be true, can it?
Right. And you know what happens, Peter? This is one of the best part of my job, I think, is clients need that too.
How do you mean?
They need to feel that too. They're humans like you and I. And when you come in as somebody who has self-love and optimism and you're a servant to them, that's going to rub off on them. They're going to feel that. They're going to start feeling that positivity. They might pull you aside and tell you how much they appreciate you or ask questions that are completely unrelated to what you're there for. They need it too. Clients are humans like you and I and subject to all the fears and structures that we all are subject to. So as a fractional, you have to develop that and you create this wonderful ripple around yourself where your clients benefit from that as well.
When you talk about, just out of interest, when you talk about fractional, are you always talking about fractional CMOs or are you talking about fractional at large? Because I'm aware that you can have fractional COOs and fractional CTOs and...
Yeah, you want to hear a funny story about that? So yes, we teach all fractionals. There is a fractional COO, CIO, CTO, CMO, CSO. What fractional is, it's those perpetual roles in a business. They're not perpetual is different than full-time. You always have to have a CFO in a business. Throughout the years that you're in business. Can you imagine we're going to have a CFO on year 1, but not on year 2? The whole thing's going to blow up. Like, which tire are you going to take off the car? Those are roles, but they're just not full-time roles. So they're perpetual. They're always there, but they don't need you to be there all the time. And in fact, the more wisdom you have, the less time you're needed at those places. So it is universal on those perpetual roles in a business. That's fractional. So the funny story about that, Peter, is when Jason and I, my partner in Voyager U, and just one of my best friends, and he's an amazing writer, we were creating this thing and creating lessons about it. And we both came from marketing. And we said, let's create, we did it. We kind of figured out fractional for ourselves. And we said, well, let's help others do this. So our first crack in 2018 was called Unified Funnel Metrics. That's what we were called. And it was basically fractional training for marketers, for CMOs. What a long, ugly, terrible name.
I fell asleep at Unified.
Oh my God, it was terrible. We just weren't that creative on that day. But so we started training people how to do this fractional thing. Marketers only, very specific to marketers. We started to get people joining, and we had a community then who were not in marketing. What are you doing here? You're in legal. What are you doing here? You're in ops. What are you doing here? You're from IT. And people would say, well, I know what fractional is. There's no other way to learn this. You're the only ones teaching it. So what we learned was, wait a minute, this isn't just a marketing phenomenon. This is universal. And of course, at the time, it wasn't even called fractional. It was called gig work. So long story short, we were UFM for less than a year and realized we have to open up the tent, because the foundational things in what we taught, the self-discovery, the systems and processes of starting your own entrepreneurial business, but all the foundational, they weren't limited to marketers. It was limited to people, how you think and how you go into the world. And so we opened the tent and said, this is fractional for everybody. It's for everybody, because we all deserve the benefit of being a self-sovereign, free worker in society. We don't currently have a lot of structures for that. And now we do with fractional. And so we very quickly opened up the tent and being farther than CMO.
Yeah. So did you go from, you mentioned you grew your business until 2018, was it?
Yeah.
So did you sell that?
I sold it to my partners. Yeah.
Okay.
Two very good friends, wonderful, wonderful people.
Did you go from that to being fractional?
Yes, right away.
Why did you make that change? Because that seems like a zag.
Yeah, a total zag, right? I started a company and grew it and sold it in a 14-year window. The reason I did it, there's a couple things. One was managing people's heart. A lot of dimensions, and I love people, but managing people's great.
That's manifestly evident, John, from this conversation. Okay.
Yeah.
If the listener hasn't got that this far in the conversation, then they haven't been listening.
That's right, listener. That's the universal truth. It is very hard. And having done that in a very intimate, caring, but also challenging way in my own company for a very long time, I felt as if managing people, which is probably the wrong way to say it, was very, very difficult and takes a lot of time and energy. And I just didn't want to do that anymore. Now, what's funny about that, so I went from that, I had the idea, I'm like, wait a minute, I can be the CMO for several different companies. If they're under $50 million, they're not going to need me full time. They just need the wisdom. That was the model in my head. We didn't call it fractional in 2018. We didn't start calling it fractional in earnest until about 2022. That was just gig work. Different than consulting, different than interim, because it was perpetual, but it was still forming. So that was a big difference, right? Like managing people. And then sort of my growing up, like a lot of people, you start in the creative department and start doing things. And then you're a creative director. And then you're a partner or something like that. That arc of doing to managing. What I really like is leading. I love that. I love helping people get the best out of themselves and all of that. I don't have to manage people for that. I just have to help them. I just have to lead. Like I'm leading the fractional movement right now. I don't have a single employee.
So are you largely responsible for creating the concept, I don't know if that's the right word, of fractional? Did it not really exist before you came along?
Yeah. Jason and I, we did a lot of work to advance fractional and put it in that bucket. I wrote Revolt, The Rise of Fractional and the Death of Full Time a year and a half ago. The book. That's a little bit of it's a manual for fractional. And we were calling it gig work. We knew that, and everybody's just all over themselves. What do we call this thing, this new thing? And fractional emerged as the term that the market said, I get it. I understand. It gave us a place where we could say it's not consulting because that's project. It's not interim because that's got an ending. It is perpetual.
Perpetual. Yeah.
It's perpetual.
Yeah. I love that distinction. I've not been aware of that. And it's really great that it's been recorded and I've learned something from this episode. It's like, it's a perpetual role. You're going to need this role in your business.
Right.
And fractional is probably the most cost-effective way of getting that
for sure.
expertise.
Yeah, it certainly is a beautiful thing because if you're a $20 million company and you want to grow, if you want to hire Peter full time, that's going to be $300,000. Look at all the gray you have in your beard. You got a lot of wisdom, right? Like you've got a lot of wisdom. You're going to come at a high price, rightly so. But they're not going to have $300,000 a year to pay you. But I'll take you for $100,000 because I really want your wisdom and leadership. I don't need the rest. I got people to do the churny kind of things. So that dynamic is people are learning it. They're doing it. They're getting the great benefit from it. It really, really does work. It's a whole new dimension in the American work culture or the global work culture.
So what was the impetus from going from being a fractional CMO yourself to training others to do it?
Probably curiosity.
Coming right back to lifting rocks to find salamanders. It's like, it's the same John there. That's amazing.
I will tell you a big part of it. Yes, that curiosity, fascinated with it. It's a whole new dimension. Maybe I was lucky that I saw it earlier than most people, maybe even first. I don't know. But I saw it and I'm like, this is special. This works. This respects a lot of things. It respects the age and wisdom and skill and acumen that people have. It respects the business's need for flexibility and less price, but more value. And that's about all my brain put to it. Very small brain up here. But what I realized is there's a deeper power behind it. And the way what we call that now is freedom or self-sovereignty. And that's where I got really and continue to be really passionate about this. Is we got into a shareholder economy in 1980 with Milton Friedman. And what that means is shareholders, number one, we care most about shareholders of the company. And what that means is we don't care as much about the employee. And it's been going that way since 1980, and now it's starting to erode. So if the employee is number two, then the nature and the culture and everything wraps around delivering shareholder value and not value to the individual. People are cogs in the machine to deliver shareholder value. I thought and continue to think that's incredibly unhealthy. I think it's an aberration of the norm because if you look at least America's founding, we began as a self-sovereign nature. Self-sovereign, build yourself up on your own shoulders. Well, if the whole structure of the economy is plug yourself in and we can cut you in a minute and we'll replace you in 2 seconds, we won't even remember your name. It's not very, you don't have much, you don't feel like you can have control over your future, your destiny. You're in somebody else's game. That is not self-sovereign. In fact, in many ways, it's unjust. So what I realized, like, wait a minute, we all have a need to be our own boss. We all have a nature of that. We're not built to just be in a cubicle and serve until we're laid off. There's more to every human being than that. So I realized there's a justice and a self-sovereignty dimension to fractional as well. And when you look at it that way, and you fall in love with yourself and you realize your value and you're claiming your independence and you're claiming your self-sovereignty, can you imagine like the value you bring to your customer and the value they get to help them grow? That's the energy everybody wants. So that is probably the most driving force for me. A great friend, a guy named Brett Trainer, he's out of Chicago, and he's got a thing called the corporate escapee. We've been friends since for a very long time now. And he talks about that too. Like the corporate thing is what it is. But that doesn't mean you have to just plug into it and suffer the rest of your life. There's more to you than that. And that's really what I'm trying to unearth in everybody, because I believe it to be true. You said at the beginning of the podcast, there's only one Peter. And that's a magical person. I mean, unless you're a mass murderer, you're a pretty good guy, right? And the world is going to do better if you can fully express all of that which you are.
That, like, I just couldn't think of a better way to wrap up the conversation. It was almost like you were talking directly to me, and listener, John was talking directly to you there. There is more to you than you're probably expressing. So connect with John. How can people connect with you?
For sure. You can always find me on LinkedIn. I can be found there. John Arms. I think these days, if you Google Fractional, my name probably comes up a lot. So maybe even a Google search or a Chat GPT search these days.
Mayor of Frackville.
The mayor of Frackville. Frack is an emerging event for fractionals. Voyager University is the platform from which I teach. I teach others how to do this. So those are a couple of ways that you can find.
Wonderful. And one question that I like to ask all my guests is, how can the listener, so you've helped us tremendously. I've learned things, not just about you. How can the listener and I help you the most right now, John?
Thank you for asking. I appreciate the question. The answer I have for that is, if you see someone who is struggling in their career, they're very good, they got probably some gray hair, maybe they've been laid off and they're down. Let them know that there's a path called Fractional they can follow and raise them back up. Let them know about Voyager University. Let them know about the Corporate Escapee. Let them know about Fractionals United. But I think the big thing is, there's a lot of people, when they get laid off, they're down, they're at the bottom, and they feel like it's over, when in fact it's just beginning.
Yeah, that's the springboard.
They just don't know about Fractional yet. They don't know I can teach you how to do it. They don't know about it yet. And it's a wonderful thing, but most people don't know it. So let them know. Let them know that it's only the beginning, not the end.
Amazing. And the other question that I like to finish off with is, in light of your experience of this conversation, what we've explored of your life and how we've woven that into who John is and the value that you are, because that's ultimately what your clients are buying. Bearing in mind what I said earlier about being able to jump the queue and have this conversation experience sooner rather than later, you can do that for a couple of $100, or you can join the queue to come on the podcast, booking 3 or 4 months out. Who would you like to give that $200 gift to for having this conversation experience? Who do you think would really, really value what you've just experienced?
Steve Blexrud.
Okay.
Steve Blexrud, a very good friend. He runs something, a kind of a self-awareness thing called the Breakthrough Table. I feel like I just had an hour and a half of therapy. Peter, this has been such a gift, right? This conversation has just been, I really do. I feel like, because I'm expressing, you're giving me a place to freely share. And that is just beautiful.
And presumably you can introduce me to Steve.
Yeah, I'll connect you for sure.
Great.
For sure.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do that offline. Well, online, but away from this conversation.
Online, offline. Yeah.
We're nearly at the top of the hour. I've got a little favor to ask of you once I finish record. So it just remains for me to say, John, on behalf of the listener and myself, thank you so much for sharing your non-straight line journey with us, and all of the twists and the turns and the rocks and the bikes and the Best Buys and just all the different glorious aspects of your journey, which have brought you to where you are now, and the value that you provide your clients. It's been a joy.
You're welcome. And thank you as well. This has been a wonderful, I don't know how the day could get any better for me.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Not a Straight Line. If this conversation helped to reorient your internal compass or inspired you in any way, please let us know by heading to podcast.notastraightline.life/rate and leave a rating and review. Thanks as always to Matthew Bliss of MB Podcast Services for his exquisite engineering of this episode. If you'd like him to help you with your podcast, contact details are in the show notes. And if you'd like to be a guest on the show, or there's someone whose non-straight line journey you'd just love to hear, then please visit podcast.notastraightline.life/guest. Thanks for being here with me, and I'll see you next week for another amazing, deep, inspiring non-straight line journey. Love you.